What is the best career for someone with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder? Hi, I'm Rick Green. In part one of this search for the ideal career for your attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, we heard from a number of experts, including Wilma Fellman, who specializes in ADHD and career counseling. She's helped thousands of people answer that question. What's the right job?
So the myth is that there is a list of good things and a list of bad things, and it really is a myth. I could dispel each one of those. It really depends on what's driving you.
So there's no one perfect career or even a short list of them? That's actually great news, because that means there's actually lots of very good options. And the right option for you depends on you. What matters to you? What do you love? What are your values? For me, I loved comedy, and I placed high value on helping others and education. And I found a wonderful niche in the entertainment and the education fields, combining them. But that's me. As Dr. Stephen Kurtz famously noted in our documentary ADD and Loving It, when you've seen one kid with ADHD, you've seen one kid with ADHD. And with adults, it gets even more diverse. That said, many folks with ADHD do seem to thrive in certain fields. Exciting, highly stimulating, even high-risk situations. When we find the right situation that has us fully engaged, alive, alert, it is awesome.
So often they choose a career that looks bright, sparkly to them, but they don't think about, is that bright, sparkly ability to learn new things and be challenged, how long is that going to last in that career?
For me, it began with a great job giving demonstrations at the Ontario Science Centre. Armed with a Bachelor of Science, I used static electricity to create human dandelions. I froze bananas to a few hundred degrees below zero and used them to hammer nails into boards. Oh, and using what was at the time the world's most powerful laser to burn holes in fireproof bricks in a few seconds. I could set fire to wood, and one time I actually set fire to my thumb. Problems with attention, anyone? It was amazing. I had the freedom and support to write plays, come up with ideas for exhibits, and take it all on the road with the traveling science circus. And after 5 years, I got bored and left.
So many people end up staying in a job 6 months, 9 months, 16 months, and they're done. And they'll make up some reason to quit. And what they don't understand is they're bored. They've learned everything there, and they're done. And they can't bear to stay. I personally did that for several jobs. I was underemployed, and I would take a job, oh, that looks easy and fun to learn that industry. But about 16 months, get me out of here, get me out of here.
This was long before I was diagnosed. And so I didn't understand why I would walk away from a wonderful position that was safe, secure, government pension, freedom, and I went off to do comedy. We started in some of the first comedy clubs, and then we staged stage shows, a radio series, and naturally enough, television. A series would run a number of seasons and then be done. A stage show would run for a few months and then wrap up. So in a way, I was always changing jobs, forever freelancing. It was never the same, always something new coming, and I was never bored. A lot of people wonder how I handled the stress of waiting to find out if our show had been renewed or whether we'd have to go find something else. But then most people don't have ADHD. But what happens if you love your job and the job changes? You're our company's #1 salesperson. Customers love you, and so to reward you, we're giving you a raise and a promotion to sales manager. Now you'll be managing people, tracking inventory, filling out paperwork, checking details, never seeing customers, never talking to anyone, doing financials and scheduling and timekeeping, tracking data. You're gonna love it. What do you mean you quit?
I had a patient who was 65 and 6 months away from getting her pension at the bank. She was a customer service agent, and she had the highest ratings of any employee because people walked in with complaints and she chatted them up, and they walked out not even knowing why they'd come in. And then she was downsized to be a teller, count money quietly in a distracting environment with no communication whatsoever, and reconcile her accounts at 4 o'clock. And it was a disaster. and she didn't think she could make the 6 months.
A guy likes to program, right? I really like the internet, program, and they go through and they get out there and all of a sudden they're like on probation. They don't really know what's going on and find out, well, they're in a cubicle programming themselves. They liked it when they were with other people. That was the environment. Now they're in a closet all by themselves and they're bored out of their mind.
The right environment, the helpful colleagues, the understanding boss can make a dramatic difference. And the wrong environment or unhelpful co-workers or a closed-minded boss can be brutal. In real estate, they say the key is location, location, location. With ADHD, it's about situation, the right situation. All right, it's time to talk about something that could make or break your ability to function: structure. Too many adults with ADHD resist the idea of structure, thinking, oh, I'll be bored. They want freedom, excitement, new challenges. Ironically, you'll find a lot of folks with ADHD thriving in jobs that offer lots of excitement, but within a clear structure, with very clear rules, like the military, police work, emergency rooms. You call 911 and a whole bunch of folks with ADHD are going to show up at your house. You may thrive in that kind of work if you can get in the door.
I get questions about wanting to go into law enforcement or wanting to go into the military and what the restrictions are there. And unfortunately, in the U.S. military, you have to prove or establish that you are stimulant medication free for a year's time, which is kind of ironic because what happens is that the U.S. military typically gives special forces and fighter pilots stimulant medication, whether they need it or not, to hyper-focus on their missions. But the ADHD stigma is still there, and it's very difficult to overcome going into that profession. And what is also difficult about it is that the military, and even I would say law enforcement, also are very highly structured. So people with ADHD inherently would do better there because of the structure that's placed around them.
There are higher than average rates of ADHD among athletes, and sports have very specific rules. Whereas you might think in the arts there's no structure. Well, structure doesn't mean routine or the same over and over again. An artist works inside of the same structure, basically a flat canvas rectangle, a landscape or a portrait, but inside that rectangle, the only limit is their skill and their imagination. And I can tell you that comedy, which seems to break all the rules, works inside of a number of structures, joke structures and story structures. So to review, the right job for you depends on two things: you and the job.
Don't start with what's wrong. Start with what's right. Start with your strengths. I mean, we hear this constantly: lead with your strengths.
When I ask people to imagine themselves doing something that will get their heart going, you get two responses. One is they really know, or two, they have no clue. And so we empower them to begin the process of identifying the clues of what is that heart and head piece together.
There are about 15 things that we collect data on: interests, personality, values, aptitudes, skills, abilities, your focus pattern, your energy pattern. There's a whole bunch of things we need to collect and put into the bowl and stir and see what they look like and what kinds of careers they match. And then, and only then, do I add on the layer of, okay, now what are the challenges that would prevent you from getting to your goal? And so what we want to find out first is, what are you really good at? What are you strong with? What are your passions? What drives you? And then add the transparency on top of the challenges and see where they're going to mess you up.
Which brings us to transparency, disclosure. Do you have to disclose your ADHD when you're getting hired? Should you disclose your ADHD? How much do you reveal? It's a minefield, a real minefield. I've done a separate video on who to tell, and it's full of really smart suggestions. Short answer: err on the side of caution.
Pursue something that attracts your attention, read about it, and find out whether that's really going to be a good fit. You kind of try it on mentally for size.
This is great advice for everybody. Talk to people who are already doing that job to find out what's involved. Or research the organization that you're interested in. You'll spend more time at your job than with your family, so you want to know what you're getting into. And it helps to have lots of possibilities to choose from. That is the benefit of a career counselor, but not just any career counselor.
Part of the process, perhaps, for myself or other counselors working with them is to determine what the strengths are, what the weaknesses are, and find a profession that plays to the strengths.
Go through the process of collecting data about yourself and working with a career counselor that really gets ADD and career development. Because what we have found is that there's often a disconnect between understanding ADD really well and understanding career development really well.
I'm a big fan of Wilma Fellman. Said, how do you find a career counselor? And said, number one, here's all the places you do it. And the first thing you do is you walk in and say, do you have a list of ADHD-friendly jobs? And if they give you a list, go to the next person, because they don't understand ADD. It's putting you in a pigeonhole.
I have found that many people in my field of career development are career counselors, and they say, I understand these people. I really do. I got it. And they really don't. And they simplify completely. So a better idea is to go and do a complete workup, which takes about 6 to 8 weeks. It requires you to take some assessments.
In high school, I took one of those occupational assessment tests to match my personality and my strengths and interests, and it suggested that I become a furrier, making fur coats, peeling the skin off of dead animals. Of course, that was back in the Middle Ages. There's much better tests out there now, most designed for the average person, but we're not average. We're out there on the hairy edge. We're struggling and often failing.
And I want to caution people about assessments. In and of themselves, you can do them online. What you end up with is a pile of printouts, and it can be very frustrating because they don't seem to jive with each other. You could do one and get this set of careers and do another on your, let's say, personality and get this set of careers, and they don't seem to overlap. So it's the synthesizing of the collected data that is the key point in working with someone to transition into something else.
The problem is that until you've got a diagnosis and you start using strategies and tools that work for your quirky mind and you start succeeding, your early struggles and failures and disappointments, they add up. As we'll see in part 3 of The Perfect Career, our self-esteem can be bruised, our self-confidence crushed. So we're going to look at how to break through the doubt, to learn to trust. And it means minimizing your weak areas and playing to your strengths. And yes, you do have strengths. You just don't see them. I didn't. But then, like most folks, I was trying to overcome my weaknesses rather than develop and play to my strengths. Put it this way, basketball legend Michael Jordan would probably have struggled as a tax auditor or a kindergarten teacher. Taylor Swift would have been miserable developing software. My son loves it. That's what we mean when we say the right match for you. All right, thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments what you got out of this, what you heard for yourself. Share your thoughts, struggles, and perhaps tell us what you found works for you and might just work for the rest of this community of wonderful eccentrics.